To take care of our people and our workers, we must replace the present policy of globalism, which has moved so many jobs and so much wealth out of our country, and replace it with a new policy of Americanism. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule. That government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people.
You're listening to the Liberty Brothers radio show. Now here are your hosts, Jason Van Taper, Engine White.
Healing powers of silver, ion silver, an antiseptic powerhouse used for centuries. Now you can harness the benefits of ion silver in a convenient spray. Ion silver is a highly effective antimicrobial spray that's safe for family and pets. Excellent for wound care, a must for your first aid kit. It binds to bacteria, viruses, and fungus to immediately destroy them. Also used as an underarm deodorant, acne preventative, surface disinfectant, and more. Buy Ion Silver at ionsilver.us. That's ionsilver.us.
All right, let's get Stewart on. We're going to talk about Berkeley and these protests. So hold on, let me add Stewart to the call.
Let's add Mr. Rhodes to the call. Indeed.
So Stewart is the founder and director of the Oath Keepers. He served as a U.S. Army paratrooper until disabled in a rough terrain parachuting accident during a night jump. He's a former firearms instructor and member of Ron Paul's D.C. staff. He has previously written for Enemy at the Gates. This was a column on SWAT magazine. Stewart graduated from Yale Law School in 2004, where his paper Solving the Puzzle of Enemy Combatant Status won Yale's Miller Prize for Best Paper on the Bill of Rights. He assisted teaching U.S. military history at Yale and was a Yale research scholar. He's writing a book currently on the dangers of applying the laws of war to the American people. So, Stewart Rhodes, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, Stewart, we wanted to get you on because, it's been a while, and welcome back to the show, by the way. And you've got a new operation coming up in Berkeley, which is, man, that is the belly of the beast. So tell us a little bit about, first off, I'm sure most of our listeners know about the Oath Keepers, but tell us a little bit about the Oath Keepers and what's going on with Berkeley. What's happening there?
Well, in the nutshell, we are, as both current serving and former military, police, and first responders, firefighters, search and rescue, EMTs, etc. And our focus is on all of us who have taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution, and make sure that we honor that. And we reach out to the current serving and also veterans. And for us veterans, our responsibility is to, first of all, remind the current serving of their oath, but we have a responsibility in our communities to take a lead role in preparing our communities and also in assisting our communities. I just got off the phone with my leadership from Louisiana. They got tornadoes hitting the ground there, and they're getting ready to go and go ahead and mobilize and be ready to react to the tornadoes. And they did that in Georgia as well. And then before that, it was a flooding in Louisiana. So it's not just riots and civil disturbances we're concerned about. It's also natural disasters. And we see our role in our communities to be the stability point of experienced veterans who can lead the community in getting ready and then also provide direct assistance when things go bad. And that's why we're going to Berkeley. Much like we went to the Ferguson situation, we as soon as we figured out that the National Guard was not going to be properly deployed and the governor there was not going to actually defend the homes of the residents in Ferguson and their businesses, we deployed some men there to protect them against arsonists. And we guarded shops owned by blacks, Chinese, whites. It didn't make a difference to us. And we protected not just the shops, but also the apartments above them. And we were successful. We stopped arsonists who had pledged and swore they were going to burn the entire block to the ground. We stopped it from happening. And so in Berkeley, we saw, unfortunately, on March the 4th, we saw an absolute failure a second time. Milo incident was the first one, where the Berkeley PD stood back and just let people be assaulted within their view and did nothing to protect them. You had a woman who was beaten, she had a concussion, her husband was beaten and unconscious and kicked in the ribs through body armor. They were both wearing body armor. He still wound up with multiple broken ribs. And she was hit in the head with a metal pole. It's just unconscionable. And we saw on March the 4th at the first March for Trump rally there in Berkeley, same thing. Unfortunately, the Berkeley PD did not attempt to get between the two groups and keep them apart. Instead, they just formed a perimeter around the entire, they basically made a giant octagon, let them go at it, you know. And their afterwards, their public information officer said, well, we were able to prevent local residents from being harmed. How does he know? There were plenty of Californians that were there who were just trying to exercise their rights to free speech, and they were beaten and spit on and had their property stolen, had flags taken away from them and burned and trampled on the ground. A free speech sign one of them was carrying was taken away and stolen by the thugs and lit on fire. And so seeing that, there were a few people there who came from, like Base Stick Man, came prepared to defend people.
Right.
And hats off to them. But unfortunately, you know, there was not enough security there to keep that event secure. The hope was that the police would do their job. We had a feeling they were not going to, and we were proven right. And so now this time we're not going to leave it once again in the hands of the Berkeley PD only. If they do step up and do the right thing, then by all means, you know, we support that, and then we'll just go to a backup position to make sure that our people on our side stay cool. We'll police our own, and then we'll be there as backup for the cops in case they get attacked. So our model for what should happen is Salem. On March 25th, at the rally in Salem, there, the police there did a great job, and they weren't even wearing riot gear. They only had their little bike helmets on, and they were bike cops. They were on 10 speeds. And they just put their 10-speed bikes in between the two sides with their backs to the Trump people, because obviously the greater threat to the cops is from the radical leftists. And that tells you a lot. The cops know it. That's why they're facing the leftists and with their backs to the flag-waving conservatives. But they were able to keep the two sides apart for the most part. On occasion, there'd be a fight break out, and then someone would cross the line. Or there was a situation where the lefties grabbed someone's Trump flag, and then a guy jumped in there and tried to get it back, and a fight broke out. But for the most part, they were very successful in preventing the Antifa black bloc types from doing what they like to do. They like to come in and get in people's faces and spit on them and throw stuff at them and then assault them. And you can see that in footage from across the country. If they manage to get, usually it's 4 of them versus one guy, either that or a sucker punch, and then a little creep, runs back into the crowd of other black-clad people, and it's hard to find them because they all look the same. So the MO is a sucker punch and run, or it's a 4-on-1 or 5-on-1 beat down. So that's why we're going to go. We're not going to, like I said, we're not going to leave it to chance. And we hope the Berkeley PD steps in and does their job correctly, and does it much the same way the Salem PD did. But hope is not an operational plan. So we're going to go there, and if the Berkeley PD will not do it, then we will do it for them.
Stewart, this is Jim. How's it going, man? Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Jim. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you? I tell you, it's we know that of course violence is always a last resort option that we never want to go to. And generally speaking, right? Me and people like us, we know that that's available. We don't want to have to go there. We would rather, and speaking for myself, I'd rather intellectually, outman the other guy as opposed to go to violence. I'd rather outsmart him, or at least be a better researcher than he is, or more knowledgeable. But these people now, Stewart, you being a trained lawyer, I know you probably have the same mindset. You want to argue things verbally first before you actually ever go to another extreme. They don't seem to want to have that same game plan. They seem to want to go to like violence and punch you in the face and run. They don't want to talk. They don't want to listen to reason. They don't want to hear logic. I mean, this is like, I haven't seen anything like it before. What say you about that? I mean, is this a different type? It's all like a tactical thing, of course, as we know. Is this a different kind of tactic that you've seen before? Because they don't seem to want to listen to reason. How about that?
Well, no one's obligated to listen to anything you have to say, and no one's obligated to even enter into a conversation with you. So if they want to wave signs and flip you off and yell and scream, that's their right to do that. So I don't look at violence as somehow being on the spectrum of debate. I'm not sure it's not what you meant. No one has the right to initiate violence against somebody else. It's called assault for a reason. Okay, assault, spitting on you is also assault. Throwing something at you is assault. Any kind of unwanted touching is an assault. Battery is where assault and battery is like they spit on you and then they punch you in the face. That's assault and battery in most places. So we're talking about here, it's got nothing to do with speech. It's just pure violence. Now, it is being done for the purpose of chilling speech and stopping speech and punishing speech. And so under the current definition of terrorism under federal law, which is basically any action taken to the threat of violence or the use of violence to shape behavior and change the behavior of the population, that's considered terrorism. And that's kind of an expanded definition of terrorism from what it used to be like, which was targeting innocents and non-combatants. But that's the current definition, and in the current definition, this certainly fits. And I think it even fits the old definition. I mean, we're not at war, and yet they want to go and they're beating women up, they're assaulting women and old people, and people who are not by any stretch of the means combatants or military age. So they've just stepped out entirely outside the Constitution, and their entire point is they want to shut down free speech, and they want to trample and destroy the Constitution and replace it with their own utopia, which is pretty much a Marxist viewpoint of the world. Even the ones that call themselves, so-called anarchists, they're right there with communist flag flying. You got the red Soviet hammer and sickle flag flying, and they're right there with hardcore communists. And so, as far as I'm concerned, they're all Marxists. But that's their worldview. That's why they burn the American flag and spit on you if you're a veteran. That's why they like that one professor. That's why he was, felt like vomiting when someone gave their seat for a soldier on a plane. These people hate this country. They absolutely hate anyone that ever served in the military or police. And they want to destroy not just this country, but all Western civilization and replace it with their own Marxist utopia. So really what this really is actually is a repeat of what we saw in the late 60s and early 70s with the Weather Underground in particular. And there's a really good book I encourage you all to read called Days of Rage. The author's last name is Burroughs. And it's all about the Weather Underground, the Assembly's Liberation Army, the Black Liberation Army, these radical leftist groups that popped up in the early 70s and began a campaign of terrorism. And the Weather Underground, it's actually kind of a pretty good parallel. The Weather Underground started off as the Students for Democratic Society, a massive organization all across college campuses that were protesting the Vietnam War. Well, the leadership of that organization wanted to take it more hardcore. Nixon won the election. They were dispirited about what they could affect and change through politics. They gave up on politics. More mainstream liberals wanted to keep trying to win elections and do things with the system as they've been doing, the long march, right, through all the institutions. Well, the Weather Underground types, Bill Ayers, Bernardine Dorns, Jeff Jones, these other radicals at the top of the pyramid of SDS were impatient with that and wanted to give up on it. They wanted to spark a violent revolution. And so the first act they did as the Weathermen was to organize what they called the Days of Rage in Chicago, and where they were going to go attack the police and start fighting the police directly in the streets. And they tried to rally students all across the country, including high school students. They went to multiple high schools and would run through the halls screaming, and the women throwing their tops off and trying to get the high school students to join the revolution. They reached out to the working class teens and in small towns. A lot of times they want them getting beat up by the teens who were like, oh, I'm not going to get on your communist bandwagon. Instead, I'm going to kick your ass. But anyway, so they tried to spark this uprising among the people for a revolution, but they failed. They could only get about 300 hardcores to go with them and attack the cops. And they did. They attacked the police over a 2-day period in Chicago, and most of them wound up arrested. So they failed to spark this massive revolution. So then they turned to actual terrorism to try to kick off the their dreamed of communist revolution in the United States by the working class. And they switched gears also. They pretty much abandoned the working class and they went to identity politics. They really focused on black nationalism and black liberation and the Black Panthers. They really focused on the Hispanic separatist groups. And so they went this identity politics route. And that's where the left has kind of gone since then. They pretty much did abandon the working class, which is exactly why Trump won and why Hillary lost. And they've gone to identity politics to an absurd degree now, right? It's like they carved up the American people among all kinds of different little subgroups of grievances or imagined grievances. And their goal is to maximize those grievances and to get them to turn against their own country. And they've been successful with a lot of them, unfortunately. So that's why, like back then, in interviews with some of the still living Weather Underground people, the author quotes them as saying, what we really wanted to be was Black Panthers. That's what one of them said. They really wanted to be Black Panthers. They thought the Black Panthers, the Black nationalists, were the epitome of the resistance to the corrupt government. So what we're seeing now is a repeat. That's why you see Bill Ayers in charge of, or right there founding, Refuse Fascism. It's an open communist organization effort to subvert the United States government and overthrow a sitting president, and also replace the system of government. So Bill Ayers is making one last Hail Mary pass at getting his dreamed of revolution sparked. I think what Antifa really is, and the Black Blocs and BAM, by any means necessary, all these other groups like this, the Redneck Revolt, all of this stuff is a repeat of what we saw back then. And their goal is the same, is to, maximize grievances and get as many people as possible to abandon the system that we're under, the Constitution, free markets, capitalism, and instead to embrace their, desired overthrow and then their utopia. Some of them are actual Stalinist or Maoist. Others among them are more like a local communist who want, communism at a very local level. That's mostly anarchists. But the common denominator is that they all hate the Constitution, hate the republic that they were born into, and want to destroy it. So that is their goal. And of course, they hate free speech. What communist throughout history has not trampled on any individual liberty to get their way? They always suspend free speech and elections. They always suspend absolutely every right that human beings have ever fought for, and it ends up in a dictatorship, which they don't mind, as long as they're on top.
They always seem to, at first, be talking a whole nother game. The liberal, we've seen such a massive change in the liberal mindset in just the last year almost, that we went from, kind of the folks that I would classify my parents as, which, watching MSNBC and just kind of doing their thing under Obama. But now we're seeing this militarization. We're seeing these groups like the radical rednecks and whatnot, where they're arming up now. Now they're marching around with guns. And it just seems to be such a dramatic difference so quickly. It almost reminds me of things we've seen in history down in South America with some of these communist groups coming in. And the whole reason the FBI was originally formed was to combat these communist Marxist groups coming in and perpetrating these bombings. Why do you think it's happened so quickly, Stewart? Why are we seeing such a change from kind of that aged hippie liberal stereotype to this new radicalized young, violent, I'm going to punch you because I think you're a Nazi, and silence anything at any means that I don't agree with?
Well, I think it's because like I said, they've given up on the political system. A lot of these young kids have only known Obama, right? It's been 8 years, so some of them are 20, right, 21 years old. Their entire adult life has been under Obama. And they, of course, they claim to be, as upset with the Democrats as the other Republicans, yet they weren't out there beating up Democrats during the Obama administration. They were beating up, Obama supporters. So I think that they much like the Weather Underground, so I brought that up, is that they now feel frustrated that they can't attain their desired goal through the political means. A lot of the more Fabian socialists and more moderate socialists will, they did a long march to institutions, and they've been successful over time steering this country towards, more towards their ideal, which is, of course, is international, unaccountable international bodies. They worship the United Nations. It's basically a globalist agenda. Of course, they always couch it in terms of, being against exploitation of people, and yet they wind up with more and more centralized power, which is what communists always wind up doing. they always end up in a dictatorship that never withers away, right? The dictatorship of the proletariat is supposed to last only a certain amount of time and then wither away. Once it killed all the reactionaries off, all of us, once it killed us all off or re-educated us, it's supposed to wither away. It never does. That's why Castro died. He was a dictator for life. Chavez, Pol Pot, Mao, Stalin, they're all dictators for life. That's how they end up. But anyway, the point is that they are giving up on the political system as it is. They don't believe they can change it. And they'll even say that. That's why they criticize Democrats for even wanting to be involved in voting or politics. They criticize the free speech, ACLU type liberals who still support free speech and assembly. They consider them like, mamby-pamby, weak, and delusional. Their thinking is they must fight. This is basically, they saw themselves as going through a slow communist revolution through the electoral process. Obama, then it's going to be Hillary. Then after that, they have a permanent block on a block of power because of all the mass immigration. They can change the voting demographics and ensure themselves a block and a permanent lock on power. And I think because they failed, and Trump is a reflection of the reaction from American people to this plan of theirs. So they see us as counter-revolutionaries. In a way, they're right, because they were trying to transform the United States into a socialist and then a communist country through a slow process. And now it's being pushed back, like we're seeing in Europe. There's pushback in France, there's pushback in Germany, pushback in England. So they're starting to see pushback from people who just don't want to live under that kind of a system and are pushing back against it. And so they consider us the counter-revolutionary reactionaries. And that's why they call us all Nazis and fascists. A lot of them believe that. They believe that if you're not a communist and you don't accept the communist worldview and fight for it, then you're a reactionary. So them, it's like, black and white. Either you're a true communist and support the revolution, or anarchist, or whatever they want to call themselves, or you're some kind of reactionary fascist. So that's why, and of course they're cutting their own throats politically. So they're lumping all of us libertarians, like we're all libertarians, right? I know you guys are, and so that's what I was. And I came from the Ron Paul Republican, libertarian wing of the Republican Party. Yep. But they still lump us right in there with, neo-Nazis and skin. Here I am, a quarter Mexican and part Indian, and yet to them I'm still a fascist because I'm standing up for the Constitution and standing against what they want. They want to destroy the Constitution and replace it with their utopia. So anyone in the way is going to be labeled a fascist and is going to be attacked, and eventually they'll start using bombs and bullets just like the Weather Underground did. That's where we're going with this, I think, unless we can keep a lid on it. So our goal is to try to keep a lid on it, and hopefully the more moderate liberals, the ones that still believe in the First Amendment, will help us and marginalize these radicals. So far, I have not seen enough from the so-called, moderate constitutional left or First Amendment left about this. I want to see them out there protecting people and stopping the far left from using violence.
Stewart, what do you think the prospects are actually? You mentioned it here, the moderate people on the left. I believe that the general population that considers themselves left-leaning is not for punching someone in the face. I mean, typically what happens is, what happens on our side, sure, we didn't want to see Obama win the election, and it was terrible to see him win twice. But we kind of said, okay, shut up. We'll get him next time. We're going to continue to work and have radio shows and do things to try to combat it. I don't see them really ever going mainstream. Do you ever see them going mainstream? I don't. Stuart, what do you think?
Well, all the people that have been jumping on board with refused fascism, which was founded by communists, all of these people in the Black Bloc and Antifa. No, you're right. I don't think you're going to get. On their own, they might abandon, as happened in the 70s. There were some who abandoned. They were part of Weather Underground and then realized it was delusional and was not going to be effective. But that's a key point, right? They didn't stop because they had a strike of conscience. They stopped because they didn't believe it was going to be effective. And so I think there'll be some of them they'll give up on it, and because they don't think it'll prevail. But I think quite a few of them, if they think they can get away with it, it'll actually do something. They're going to keep pushing. So that's why it's important for us, for the American people, to put the stop to it. I think it's important for us to be our own security, because what we're being presented with is kind of a false choice. It's either The ones that say, well, let the cops handle it. Well, a lot of places the cops are not going to handle it. And of course, we don't have a cop standing next to us as we walk throughout our day. So in the end, it falls to us. And if we don't handle it, then it will be the false choice between absolute chaos in the streets and violence and murder and terrorism on the one hand, or a police state on the other. And that's something else to watch out for. The deep state, the shadow government, the globalist, whatever you want to call them, they would love to see all the Trump supporters demand, more surveillance and a COINTELPRO program against the leftists and mass arrests, et cetera, like the Palmer raids in World War I. They would love to see that because they want to see us have that false choice of, either you submit yourselves to violence and chaos, and intimidation and terrorism, or you jump into the arms of the police state. Well, the real answer is that the founders told us a long time ago, is we the people. We're supposed to be the militia, right? That's the security of a free state, is we the people, armed and trained and organized in our local militias. That is a safe place to put the power to keep the peace in our communities. So that's another reason why we're going to Berkeley, is to show by our example of how it needs to be done across the country. And so I call on all veterans, all retired military and police to step up in your communities, whether you do it with us, whether you do it on your own, who cares? But make sure that you are there. Don't just leave it to the cops. Because that's kind of the point of a lot of these disturbances, is to overwhelm the police and get people to see the police as being ineffective in protecting them. This is classic, revolutionary theory, right? You convince the population that the government can't protect them. You intimidate the population, as has been done by communist revolutionaries across the world, and you get them to bend the knee to you so that they go to the side that they think is going to prevail. That happened over and over again throughout history. The only real way to counter that is to provide local security. You must provide security in the neighborhood level and the town level against that kind of coercion. So what we're seeing now is like a more low threshold version of the intimidation and violence you would see, like, say, in the villages in South Vietnam, when the Viet Cong come in at night and terrorize people and kill those who cooperated. Same goes in Afghanistan. This is what insurgents always do, is use the fear of reprisal from them to get you to go along with them. This is somewhat similar. I think what the left has done now is a lot of them, they were relying on having control of the executive branch, greatly expanded powers of the executive in this country, the imperial presidency, to chill the speech of their opponents and punish their opponents, and go after them. And so they had that in their hands with Obama, and they were going to have it in their hands again with Hillary. And that's why, like, Southern Poverty Law Center, what we call is anti-government, right? Because they had the power. There was their guy. Obama was a communist. That's what he was, right? He's a radical communist who also is very sympathetic to radical Islam, as many, look at Ellison, Keith Ellison, same way. Was a radical communist who became a Muslim, and he has no problem at all bringing the two together. So my point is, though, is that they had the power in the presidency to use that against their opponents. The FBI, the CIA, the NSA, all of that was in their hands. Well, now they're less sure about that because of Trump, and now they feel like, they no longer can just, punish us and chill our speech through the governments, through the use of the federal government. So now what Antifa really is their brown shirts. These are their non-government, NGO thugs who will intimidate us and chill our speech. It's the same goal.
Stewart, hold on. We've got our last break coming up, and we got you for the rest of the hour. Folks, keep listening to Liberty Brothers Radio Show. We have Stewart Rhodes, president and founder of the Oath Keepers, on, and we're talking about Antifa and a lot of the movements we're seeing. There's an event coming up in Berkeley. So we'll be right back on the other side of the break.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, and welcome back to the Liberty Brothers Radio Show. We are on the home stretch, and we want to thank you for bringing us into your home on this Sunday evening and having some discussions with us. Today we've got Stewart Rhodes, founder and president of the Oath Keepers, with us, and we've been talking about kind of The rise of the left and the radical left and the modern rise of it and how that's affected things and these protests that are going on, the violent tactics that have been used. And so the Oath Keepers are not, this isn't their first rodeo when it comes to violent demonstrations. There was Ferguson that happened, and the Oath Keepers were there protecting people where they lived, where they slept. There was a whole building that was basically, they had buckets of water putting out, fires as Molotov cocktails were thrown and chaos all around them. Now, this will obviously be a little different because it's a march and whatnot. So, Stewart, tell us a little bit about this Patriot Days March and what you expect to see there, and how can people begin doing similar things in their own area? How can people replicate what you're doing?
Well, this was put on by Rich Black, and he was the gentleman that sponsored the March for Trump event. And he has a new group he started called Liberty Revival Alliance, and that's the official sponsor for the event. We're lucky to have a young Oath Keeper Marine Afghan veteran that lives in the Bay Area as well, who has now jumped in and helping Rich with his security plan. And then I brought John Kerriman, who was our team leader twice in Ferguson, first during the riots when we were up on the rooftops protecting buildings, and then the second time around when he and his guys as volunteers were helping escort an Alex Jones crew. So John Kerriman is a defensive tactics instructor, police academy instructor in Missouri, and a veteran police officer. And so he's going to be flying out and be the actual ground leader for our security detail. I will be there because I never ask anyone to do anything I don't want to do myself. But John will be the guy in charge because that's his wheelhouse. That's what he does best. So what we're looking for is, and this is what we want to see other groups do as well, is tap into your pool of experienced police officers, retired cops, bring to the table quite a few skills. Most of them are riot trained. They understand the law. They understand use of force. They understand how the police system works. They can be good liaisons to the local police, whether they're being active or not. It's a good idea to have retired cops on the ground wherever you're at. Also, the military veterans, quite a few of them have had riot training, especially the National Guard guys. But the other skill sets are important too. People who have medical training, communications, all those things can work. And I know plenty of guys who were never prior service who are sort of can handle themselves, like you, Jason, you're an MMA fighter. So a guy like that who can handle himself and keep his cool, I think the most important thing is to have cool, level-headed people that are not going to get ruffled or too scattered when they have someone yelling in their face and throwing crap. So and most people that are in the military or have some pretty good training behind them that can do that. That's what we want to see: is the most trained, most credible, and effective people take the front and be the ones that keep the peace. And that way, you keep your hotheads in check. Because look at it this way: if you don't do it, if the ones that are more competent don't do it, somebody else will. Guys who are not as well trained or not as cool and collected will step in and do their best to protect people. And they might wind up doing it in a way you don't like. But guess what? You've got no right to criticize them if you're not willing to do it yourself. So, and then there's also the chance of bad actors, actual fascists like the neo-Nazis and white supremacists and white nationals will step in and start trying to infiltrate and provide security. And so we don't want that. So, so that's why it's a tremendous mistake, I think, for the people that actually are credible and capable to step aside and not go and protect people. First of all, it's a violation of your oath, I believe. So we had a lady write in a comment on our site. She pointed out that she was there and she had her flag stolen from her and trampled on the ground. She was spit on. She had, people pulling her hair. She's a mother of two guys that served. One guy served in Afghanistan and one served in Iraq. I think it's pathetic that she has to put herself at risk like that and suffer that kind of abuse and having police just stand by and watch. I think it's pathetic. So I wrote back to her. I told her, we won't let that happen to her again. So we have to make sure that we step up. And like I wrote in the comment to her, to all the men out there that are concerned about their own safety and are not willing to go and go do this, frankly, I hope her comment will shame them because she's going back there on the 15th. There should never be a no-go zone inside the United States where patriotic Americans can't go wave a flag without being assaulted by communist flag waving thugs. There's no such thing as no-go zones in the United States. That's what we need to make sure that we establish at Berkeley and then again across the country. If they want to come yell at us, they can come yell at us, wave signs all they want to, but they don't get to come assault people. We're going to put a stop to it.
Do you think, Jim, sorry, I know I'm jumping the queue here.
Sorry.
Do you think that, I know that in the release you guys put out on the website that you said that there some groups have already responded that they would be there. What do you think the reaction is going to be? Do you think it's going to be a target? Do you think there's going to be a lot of them? Do you think it's going to make them slink back into the shadows?
I don't know. We'll see. I think our model is how it went in Salem. A lot of our guys, along with 3%ers, were there in pretty good numbers. And of course, the cops there did their job. It really kind of depends on the Berkeley PD. If they stand down again, it could be bad. We don't know. But I just know we have an obligation to do our best to keep things cool and prevent people from being assaulted. So I'm not going to go into more detail because we have operational security concerns. We're going to do our best to prevent it from going down like it did last time. But, I'm going to make it very clear, we're not going there to, get retribution or punish them or anything like that. We're just going there to prevent them from assaulting people. And if they want to go wave their communist flags and yell and scream, they can do all they want. That's fine. Go right ahead. But if they try to assault people, we're going to defend them, plain and simple. So we'll see. I know the 2 Million Bikers, the group that was used to be affiliated with the Bikers for Trump, is another like a sister organization. I know they've responded. And they're going to be there, and there's a few other groups that have also voiced an intent to be there. And I think the more people like that step up, the better, especially if they're from California. But even if you're not from California, if you want to lend a hand and think you got the skill sets, email us. It's berkeley@oathkeepers.org is the contact email for this operation. But if you're a leader of another group, contact us. We'll put you in direct contact with the organizer, with the young Marine who prefers to be, nameless for now. He's going to be in charge of coordinating with other groups. We'll put you in touch with him, though. Just email us at berkeley@oathkeepers.org, and we'll put you in touch with him. So we'll see. But I think that the message is that across the country, Americans need to realize they can't just go to sleep because Trump was elected. I think it's a really huge mistake. You need to understand that was a battle, not the war. And whether Trump turns out in the long run to be, a constitutionalist or not, that's not the point. The point is that certainly the bad guys didn't like his election. It's pretty obvious. The globalists didn't like it. That's why the deep state's turning against him at every turn. They see him, I think he's pretty much like another Reagan. Well-intended, I believe. And much like Reagan, they're doing their best to isolate him and cut him off, surround him by neocons and keep him from doing too much damage to their agenda so that when he leaves or is killed and Pence takes over, they can carry on with the globalist agenda. So, but the point is, though, is that he rode a wave of resistance to this agenda and a wave of discontent in this country. And that's where the real force is. There was the Ron Paul wave, and then there was the Tea Party wave, and now there's the Trump wave. But it's all a reflection of the same concern from Americans who want to preserve our heritage and preserve our country and preserve our Constitution. So I think we should ride that wave also. So by being out there in front and protecting people, you now have the best chance of influencing the Trump supporters to make sure that they understand the Constitution and make sure that they hold his feet to the fire, right? So I think it's important for all of us in the Patriot movement or the broader liberty movement to be very active, even if you don't care for some of the things that Trump said during the campaign. I didn't care for the whole advocacy of stop and frisk. I think that's disastrous and unconstitutional. I didn't care for his agreeing with Hillary that they should use the no-fly list to disarm people. That'd be me. I would be on that disarm list. There's a lot of things that indicate that he has a less than perfect understanding of the Constitution. But the way to fix that, I believe, is to make sure that you're out there talking to his supporters and using them to put pressure on him and educate him on the Constitution.
Stewart, I want to get your reaction to something here. We're all three Montana residents. Recently, and I think that the Democrats in this state, across the country, but this state particularly, are marginalizing themselves, and even common sense people, I think, are going to start turning their back on them, and I think they have already. You probably saw they turned down the actual bill that was they voted against the bill that would have made sure that there's no Sharia law here in the state of Montana, and they didn't seem to think that was a very good idea. Can you comment on that, being a resident here?
Well, I think it is an indicator unfortunately, I mean, I went to UNLV and then went to Yale Law School, and so I got an indicator of what the core of the Marxist left is in the universities, and they dominate ideologically. They're beginning to dominate the Democratic Party. And so, when they go to law school, they go to college and law school, and then they go on and become politicians. Quite a few of them, like Ellison, for example, they call themselves progressives. But what is a progressive? It's really a Marxist, which is just a communist. So that's what they really are. So I wouldn't say every Democrat's like that, because I know some Democrats who then became Ron Paulers and are now part of Oath Keepers. So we want to say that. What I would say, though, is that the Democratic Party is dominated by the Hillary Clinton types, who are the globalists, pretty much a sociopathic, power-mad person. And then you have your true believer Marxists, like Ellison, who dominate in the Democratic Party. So I think there's, Cornel West was on the platform committee for the Democratic Party this last cycle. That's the notorious Harvard communist professor who now is right there with Carl Dix, the Revolutionary Communist Party leader. So these are hardcore Marxists. So yes, the Democratic Party is in an internal fight for its own life against the Marxists inside of their own party. The guys who are working class, blue collar Democrats, because Granddaddy was a Democrat, in the unions, like I used to be in the Teamsters Union in Las Vegas. A lot of those guys are not communists; they're just hard working stiffs, right? They need to understand that they're in a fight inside their own party with the radicals. And these radical Marxists do see Islam as a weapon against the West. That's why they're in bed with the radical Islamicists in Europe and here in the United States, because they have a common enemy and a common goal. Both believe in a worldwide revolution and conquest for their ideology. Both believe that their ideology must dominate every square foot of the earth. And they are both willing to use force to get that. And they both have a common enemy. That common enemy is Western civilization. And so they have joined an alliance to destroy Western civilization. I'm not saying every single Democrat's part of that, like I'm not saying every single Muslim is part of that, but that is the ideology that is behind that alliance, is a common enemy.
Stewart, how can people support, if they can't get out there, if they can't go to California, how can they support what's going on and this operation's going on?
Well, for the operation itself, the direct support, we would appreciate. You can help us out with gas money for our guys. You can just go to the donate button on Oath Keepers, make a donation. That would certainly be helpful.
That's oathkeepers.org.
Right, oathkeepers.org. But the other thing they can do, I encourage them in their own communities just to start putting together effective neighborhood watches and effective town-level groups for mutual aid and assistance, and even a town watch. And, go join your local volunteer fire department, go join your search and rescue, join your EMT team, whatever your CERT team, whatever you can do in your community to become active and strengthen it, the better. And the more you can bring what I call uniting the warrior class, and that is the local police and the military veterans and the retired cops, together with your first responders, together with all of your gun owners, that's your warrior class. That's the pool of patriotic Americans who you can rely on in the worst case situation, like a riot or civil disturbances, to secure the community. Like the Korean shop owners on top of the roofs with rifles during the Rodney King riots, that's part of the warrior class. The young black men in Ferguson who were guarding some of the stores there against the looters, they're part of the local warrior class. We want to get them together so they can work together to keep the community safe. But within that, you should exclude anybody who wants to overthrow our Constitution and replace it with something else, that they should not be allowed to participate. Obviously, domestic enemies of the Constitution.
Sorry, Stewart, to interrupt you. You brought up a good point that I wanted to reiterate here, and I think this is a misconception of the people that are in the libertarian or patriot movement. We would much rather, I know speaking from myself, and I think you'd probably agree, we'd much rather work hand in hand with good constitutional, loving, following police officers than be opposed to them. And I think that the misconception is that we don't like police or we're against police. And that is just completely false. That's what I would consider fake news from the old school fake news. Can you comment on that, Stewart? I'm sure you probably feel the same way. We'd much rather work with law enforcement than against them. Is that a fair statement?
Well, sure, certainly. But we also need to be ready and willing to criticize them when they do wrong and oppose their wrong actions.
Of course.
And we have done that. But the easiest way, I believe, to influence your local cops is to stand up and let them know that you're willing to back them up when they do the right thing. You can't just sit on your couch eating bonbons and then try to lecture them about obeying the Constitution if you're not willing to help them. So the first step is to step up and say, you know what, if you need my help, I'm right here. Here are my skill sets, and I'm willing to do this. It's even easier to do that if you're already part of the first responder community, like you're on the EMT team or search and rescue or volunteer fire. You have much more credibility because you get skin in the game. You're already there. So my advice is go join whatever your local structure is for your first responder community. Go find something you can do and pitch in. And then you have more credibility when you approach the police officers and say, hey, if this happens or that happens, here's what I think about this, and make sure that you guys stay within the lines. We don't want to see a repeat of Katrina, where they had violations of rights and they had violations of gun rights, and police officers actually afterwards were charged and convicted of murder because they went too far. So we want to see the cops do the right thing, but the easiest way to influence them is to be there with them to make sure they do the right thing and influence what their behavior is. And you can do that if you're a credible military veteran or even better, retired cop, especially the police. If you retired police officers have an extra obligation to make sure you're active in your community and helping your police officers do the right thing. Because there is a growing discontent or anger over police abuse in this country. Some of it's manufactured by the left that wants to divide the people against the police, but some of it's legit. There's some serious problems. So like we protested in Arizona, the SWAT killing of Jose Jarena, who was a young Marine veteran, because they used a SWAT raid just to exercise a search warrant when it was entirely unnecessary. They could have just come to his house when he was at work. They knew where he worked. He worked a graveyard shift at a mine. Instead, they let him get off work, go home, go to bed, and then they raided his house. It made no sense at all. So we protested that. I think it's important for us to make sure that we keep a good balance. In Oath Keepers, we have what we call Operation Backstop. We're also calling it now Operation Background Blue. And that is that we're willing to step up and protect police in the wake of the Dallas attack and Baton Rouge attack. If they're under threat, if their families are under threat, we're willing to go and protect them and stand up and help secure the community with them. So we want to make sure that they know that we're willing to put our lives at risk if necessary, right there with them. That carries a lot of weight. If you're willing to protect their families, you let them know that so long as they do the right thing, you will back them up physically. I think that makes a big difference in how they perceive you, and they're much more likely to listen to you. And it also helps counteract the propaganda from the Southern Poverty Law Center, et cetera, that we're all potential cop killers. I think the cops now realize that's why their backs were to us in Salem as they faced the Antifa. I think the cops realize the reality that we're not the ones that have to worry about.
Stewart, what else is on your radar right now? You've got a lot going on. What else are you watching closely in the news cycle right now?
Well, what I'm really kind of worried about, in the short term, of course, is what we see on the college campuses with the absolute desecration of free speech and assembly. And so what we're hoping to do is put college chapters on college campuses for two reasons. One, to teach self-defense and teach the students how to defend themselves in the wake of, as you know, in the wake of the Quinnipiac shooting in Oregon at the college there. We saw students who were corralled into a corner and waited their turn to be shot. We want to teach the students how to defend themselves, but we also want to be on college campuses to stand up for free speech. I don't like what we're seeing on college campus now, where you have people being threatened with violence for holding views other than the views of dominant leftist views. It's very, very dangerous. So I think we have an obligation to be on the campuses, and it's also a way to outreach to people. We don't want to forsake all these young college students who are being indoctrinated with Marxism. I think it'd be a mistake. So I want to go there, and like I did when I was in law school and even undergrad, go offer free classes and teach them how to defend themselves. And while you're at it, you're also teaching them, hey, look, here's what personal responsibility is like. Here's what freedom is all about. And I think it's those, the other groups that do that, Young Americans for Liberty. I think those are good groups out there to like that. But I think Oath Keepers has a role to play in that. Aside from that, the big concern we have is the ticking time bomb of our economy and what will happen this summer. I think the globalists will probably try to, but they've even told us actually, You go read the founding documents for Refuse Fascism. They talk about creating an emergency, creating chaos, so they can use it to overthrow and have a color revolution inside the U.S. So I think you're going to see maximized grievances, like the decision that's going to be coming down soon from the DOJ about the shooting, the Sterling shooting in Baton Rouge. That could be a spark point. We don't know. But I think what will happen is they'll use whatever they can to try to create as much chaos as possible, to try to create the creative destruction that they like to have, that they can use to crush Trump, but even more importantly, crush the rise in, American, I guess you call it American nationalism, but it's not a race-based or white nationalist viewpoint. It's a preserving Western civilization, preserving our Constitution viewpoint. They want to crush that.
We're coming up at the end of the show here, Stewart, so let's go ahead and give people where they can get more information and get the most recent information on the operation. Quick, go through that.
Yeah, they can go to oathkeepers.org, and they can look on our main site there. I'll be putting more updates tomorrow, and they can check in on our site and see what we got coming up. So the big focus for right now is Berkeley. We also have a North Carolina summit. I'll be at that summit. This is this next weekend, the 6th, 7th, and 8th. I'll be in North Carolina for that. That's on our website as well. And I want to do, hopefully have a summit in each state. What we'd like to see is a roundtable of the different leadership of the different liberty-oriented groups, where they at least share information among the leaders and intelligence and communication, and have a good roundtable of leadership. I think it's important. I think it's important now to make sure these folks don't go back to sleep. A lot of them are. A lot of them are because Trump won. All of a sudden they believe that the fight's over. They can just chill, and that's a very serious error.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. All right. Well, we want to thank you for joining us again, and wish you luck with what you got going on. We'll be watching Berkeley and see what happens there, and we'll help get the word out. So appreciate you coming on with us.
If you have skill sets you think apply, come on out. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Stewart. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Talk to
thank you.
All right, Stewart. I'll talk with you shortly.
You bet.
All right, folks, that was Stewart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers, and we are just coming up to the last little stretch here. Jim, tell us a little bit more real quick on the last minute or two we have on this, the Red Pill. Where can people get tickets? Where's it going to, it's going to be?
Go to redpillexpo.org, and I just booked my room, actually, my hotel room during the show here, redpillexpo.org.
All right, folks, that's the show for this week. You've been listening to Liberty Brothers Radio Show. We'll be back next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks for spending your Sunday evening with us.